Welcome back to the deep dive, where we like to say we do the reading so you don't have to.
Well, someone has to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
So today we're going deep on aspirin.
Oh.
Yeah, oh is right.
Yeah.
This one is a doozy. Everyone and their mother has an opinion on aspirin.
It's true.
Should you take it? Should you not? Is it good? Is it bad? It's been around forever, but there's still so much we don't know.
Definitely.
So we've got a whole stack of research and articles here to sort through. We're going to try to bust some myths, uncover some truths, and hopefully by the end, you'll have a little bit better of an understanding about this tiny little pill that causes such a big ruckus. You ready to dive in?
Let's do it.
All right, so first of all, aspirin's history. It's not just some, modern invention, right? It's been around for a long time.
Yeah, it's got a long history.
Like, how long are we talking?
I mean, think ancient Egypt.
No way!
Yeah, they were using willow bark for pain relief way back then.
Willow bark? What does that have to do with aspirin?
Well, willow bark contains a compound that's essentially aspirin's ancient ancestor.
So, like, the pyramids were built on willow bark?
Maybe not entirely, but it was definitely a key ingredient in their ancient medicine cabinet.
That's wild. I never would have guessed. Okay, so ancient Egypt, that's pretty far back.
Yeah.
But I also heard something about aspirin and the Russian Revolution, which is a little more recent, but still.
Right. It's a strange connection, but it's true.
Late on me.
So, Tsar Nicholas II's son, Alexei, he had hemophilia.
Oh, yeah, right, the bleeding disorder.
Exactly. And aspirin was sometimes used to treat his pain. But the problem is, aspirin thins the blood.
Uh-oh. Not good for someone with hemophilia.
Exactly. So it could have actually worsened his condition.
Wow, so aspirin might have played a part in the downfall of the Tsar. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's one of those weird little twists of history.
History is full of them. All right, so fast forwarding a bit, we can't talk about aspirin without mentioning the Bayer company, right?
Right.
They're like the big aspirin guys.
They were early producers and marketers of aspirin, yeah.
But there's also that whole Nazi Germany connection, which makes things a little complicated.
Right, their history is a bit checkered, to say the least.
Yeah, we're not going to get into all that today, but it's definitely something to be aware of. So, okay, aspirin's got a long and, let's say, colorful past. But what about its present? What does this little pill actually do in our bodies?
Well, on a basic level, aspirin works by interfering with certain chemicals in the body called prostaglandins.
Prostaglandins. Catchy name.
Right, they're kind of like little alarm bells in your body that trigger pain, inflammation, and fever.
So aspirin's like the snooze button for those alarms.
Exactly. It helps to quiet those signals down.
I like it. So pain relief, that's one of the big things aspirin's known for. But there's also the whole heart health benefit, right? That's a bit.
Yeah, that's because aspirin is a blood thinner.
Okay, break that down for me. How does that work?
So you've got these tiny cells in your blood called platelets,
Platelets, right.
and they're important because they help your blood clot when you get a cut.
Right, so you don't bleed out.
Exactly. But if those platelets start clumping together and forming clots inside your arteries, that's bad news.
Because that can lead to heart attacks and strokes, right?
Exactly. And aspirin helps to prevent those clots from forming.
So it's like a double whammy, pain relief and potential lifesaver. Shine me up.
Ah.
But I know it's not quite that simple, is it? There's something about primary and secondary prevention, right? What's the deal with that?
Right. So it's not just a case of everyone should take aspirin.
Okay, so explain the difference.
Primary prevention is when you take aspirin to prevent a first heart attack or stroke.
Gotcha.
But the benefits for people who haven't had a cardiovascular event are less clear-cut.
Okay, so that's primary. What about secondary?
Secondary prevention is for people who have already had a heart attack or stroke.
I see.
And in those cases, the evidence for aspirin's effectiveness is much stronger.
So it's more about preventing a second one.
Exactly. It's about reducing the risk of another event.
Okay, so it's not as simple as just popping an aspirin every day and calling it good.
Right. It really depends on your individual risk factors.
Which is why you should always, always, always talk to your doctor.
Absolutely. Your doctor can help you figure out if aspirin is right for you and what dosage is appropriate.
Okay, good advice. So we know aspirin can be a lifesaver, but I've also heard about some risks. Age is a big one, right?
Definitely. As we get older, our risk of heart attack and stroke increases.
Okay.
But so does our risk of bleeding from aspirin.
Oh, so it's kind of a trade-off.
Exactly. It's about weighing the benefits against the risks.
So what else do we need to consider when it comes to aspirin's risks? What are some of the things that might make someone more likely to have problems?
Well, existing medical conditions are a big one. Like if you have a history of stomach ulcers, that increases your risk of bleeding.
Right, that makes sense. What else?
Certain medications can interact with aspirin and make bleeding more likely, especially blood thinners.
So if you're already on blood thinners, aspirin might not be a good idea.
Right. You definitely want to talk to your doctor about that.
Okay, what about alcohol? Does that play a role?
It can. Alcohol can also irritate the stomach and increase your risk of bleeding.
So no aspirin before happy hour.
Probably a good rule of thumb.
Okay, good to know. Now, I also heard something about aspirin resistance. What's that all about?
It's a real phenomenon, although we're still trying to understand all the ins and outs of it.
So what does it mean?
Basically, it means that for some people, aspirin just doesn't seem to have the same blood-thinning effects.
So, like, their body just ignores it.
In a way, yeah, it's like their platelets are throwing a party and aspirin's not on the guest list.
That's frustrating. But why does that happen? What causes this aspirin resistance?
There are a few possible explanations. Some people might absorb aspirin less effectively, or their platelets might be extra sticky for other reasons.
Sticky platelets. That sounds fun.
Right. It could be due to genetics or even things like smoking and stress.
Wow. So much for a simple little pill. It's way more complicated than I thought.
It definitely is.
But before we get too discouraged, I heard there might be another potential benefit to aspirin. Something about cancer prevention.
Oh yeah, that's a really interesting area of research.
Tell me more.
There's some evidence that aspirin might help lower the risk of certain cancers, especially those in the gastrointestinal tract.
So like buy one, get one free,
Mm-hmm.
heart health, and cancer prevention.
It's not quite that simple, but there's definitely some promising research.
Like what kind of research? What have they found?
Well, one large analysis from 2010 found that taking low-dose aspirin daily for at least 5 years was linked to a 27% reduction in the risk of colorectal cancer.
27%. That's pretty significant.
Yeah.
Is it time to ditch the kale smoothies and just start popping aspirin?
I wouldn't go that far just yet.
Okay, why not?
While those findings are really interesting, it's still early days in the research. We need more studies to confirm these benefits and really understand how aspirin might impact cancer development.
Right, so don't go crowning aspirin as the cancer-fighting champion just yet.
Oh,
But it's definitely something to keep an eye on.
absolutely. It's a fascinating area of ongoing research.
All right, so we've talked about the good, we've talked about the bad, but let's be real. No medication is perfect, and aspirin definitely has its share of downsides. We've touched on some of the risks, but let's dig a little deeper. What are some of the things people really need to be aware of before they start taking aspirin regularly?
Well, one of the biggest concerns is gastrointestinal bleeding.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit earlier.
Right. Taking aspirin regularly can irritate the stomach lining and lead to ulcers,
Ouch, not fun.
or even more serious bleeding.
Yikes. So aspirin's like that friend who shows up with a great playlist but then starts breaking your furniture.
That's a good analogy.
And you mentioned earlier that the risk of bleeding is higher for people with certain conditions or taking certain medications.
Exactly. So if you have a history of stomach problems, or you're on blood thinners, or you enjoy a few too many cocktails, your risk is higher.
Got it. So maybe skip the aspirin before that tequila tasting.
Probably a good idea.
Okay, what about stroke? Isn't there a risk of stroke associated with aspirin as well?
Yes, specifically hemorrhagic stroke.
Hemorrhagic stroke, what's that?
It's when a blood vessel in the brain bursts.
Oh, wow, that sounds serious.
It is. And it's kind of ironic because while aspirin can help prevent the more common type of stroke caused by clots, it can slightly increase the risk of this less common but more dangerous type.
So it's like a double-edged sword. It can help prevent one type of stroke, but increase the risk of another.
Exactly. It's a complex issue.
It seems like aspirin's benefits always come with the side of proceed with caution.
You could say that. It's not a decision to be taken lightly.
So I have to ask, if aspirin can be so tricky, haven't scientists tried to come up with a safer alternative? Like something that gives you all the benefits without the risks?
They have. In the 1990s, a new class of drugs called KOX2 inhibitors, or COXIBs, hit the market.
Coxibs, okay. What are those?
They were designed to be gentler on the stomach than aspirin.
Ah, so like aspirin 2.0.
You could say that. They were supposed to provide pain relief and anti-inflammatory effects without the stomach irritation.
Sign me up. Did they work?
Initially, they seemed like a miracle. They were easier on the stomach and even worked well for people who had asthma triggered by aspirin.
So where can I get a lifetime supply?
Well, there's a twist.
Oh, I don't like twists.
One of the most popular COXIBs, or Fecoxib, ended up being pulled from the market.
Why? What happened?
It was linked to an increased risk of heart attacks.
Wait, what? The drug that was supposed to be safer for the heart actually ended up being worse?
Yeah, it was a major setback.
So much for the miracle drug. But how did that happen?
It turns out that blocking COX2, the enzyme these drugs targeted, had some unintended consequences. It actually tipped the balance in favor of clot formation, which increased the risk of heart problems.
So aspirin's back in the game, flaws and all.
It seems that way.
I guess it's kind of like that friend who's always a bit dramatic, but always has your back in a pinch.
That's a good way to put it. Aspirin's not perfect, but it's earned its place in medical history.
And while research continues, we still need to be cautious and make informed decisions about whether or not to take it.
Exactly. It's all about weighing the benefits and risks and making the best choice for your individual situation.
Absolutely. So after this deep dive into the world of aspirin, what's the main takeaway for our listeners?
Well, the key takeaway here is that aspirin isn't a one-size-fits-all solution.
Okay, that's fair.
It can be incredibly beneficial for some people, especially those at high risk of heart attack or stroke.
Right.
But it's not a decision to be made lightly.
So what's the best course of action?
Talk to your doctor.
I knew you were going to say that.
It's the most important thing. Your doctor can assess your individual risk factors, weigh the potential benefits against the potential downsides, and help you make an informed decision.
So no more sneaking aspirin from your grandma's medicine cabinet.
Exactly. Self-medicating is never a good idea, especially with a drug that can have such powerful effects.
Right. Good point. And remember, honesty is key when you're talking to your doctor. Tell them about everything you're taking, even that herbal supplement you bought online.
Transparency is the best policy, especially when it comes to our health.
So to sum it all up, aspirin can be a valuable tool in the fight against heart disease and maybe even some cancers. But it's not a magic bullet.
That's a great way to put it. Aspirin's story is full of twists and turns. It's been hailed as a wonder drug and scrutinized for its risks. But one thing's for sure, it's a medication that demands respect and careful consideration.
Well said. And who knows what the future holds for this age-old remedy. Maybe scientists will unlock even more of aspirin's secrets, or maybe they'll develop an even safer alternative that gives us all the benefits without the risks.
It's an exciting time for medical research, and aspirin's journey is far from over. There's still so much to discover about this little white pill that's been with us for centuries.
That's the beauty of science. It's always evolving.
Yeah.
And speaking of evolving, if you want to stay ahead of the curve on the latest health news and research, be sure to subscribe to The Deep Dive. We'll keep you informed with fresh analysis delivered straight to your ears.
We'll dive deep into the research so you can navigate the complexities of health and wellness with confidence.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of aspirin. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep on questioning.
Yeah.